Have you watched Drive to Survive?
No.
You don't even know any of the characters' personality traits or quirks. I love my stickers. The cat is so fucking hip. Okay, so today we are doing strength and conditioning coaches react to Formula 1 drivers. And why we're doing this is because in the F1 Netflix show, Drive to Survive, a phenomenal show, and I'd highly recommend you go watch it. They keep showing montages of the athletes
Jeez, that was
training.
fucking hell.
But they keep
Says the weightlifter, like.
they keep making it a thing that it's like it's like Rocky montages where they're like getting after it, you know.
Yeah.
Now they're highly
I'd
skilled.
love to know what this fella's doing below his neck.
They're highly skilled individuals, but you know.
Yeah.
How many burpee Cossack squats do you need to do? Like,
Yeah.
so obviously neck training is incredibly vital for resisting the G forces and the braking. I was going to try to be not narky in this one, but I couldn't help myself. Athletes.
Sports that will have like commonalities with this will be like contact sports, particularly like rugby, American football, anything where you're getting that kind of impact from the side, and you'll see players very, very frequently doing a lot of neck-induced hypertrophy work. The interesting thing in the contact sports stuff and the literature I've looked into is that, so a lot of the time they were directly relating it to the mass of neck muscle you would have. So like when they do an MRI, they'd be able to measure, or they'd do a DEXA and they'd measure the amount of muscle tissue you have in your neck. But what's very important is the muscle density.
Yes.
So a lot of those big rugby players and stuff would have really big, thick necks. But in terms of for limiting concussion, the amount of fat cells or the amount of fat tissue present within that tissue is detrimental to them getting knocked out more.
So they do talk about fighters having a glass jaw, so if you have a weak neck, so obviously your ability to control the blood flow and oxygen to your brain and ability to resist forces and not be pulled out of position. Obviously when you're trying to concentrate on the road would come down to your neck's ability to maintain position.
This is a really interesting point that they raise on this video, and they say 80 to 90% of their training is general training, which should be how it is, and which is what they say how it is. Yet when we see all of the training montages, they're only doing the really specific, like, like that's the only thing they seem to be interested in filming.
Yeah.
Yet 90% of all their training is like split squats.
Yes.
And cardio.
Mostly they're just exercising because it's probably good for their health in the long run rather than probably helping them realistically in their F1 journey. So one of the things they did say in this video, which I thought was very interesting, was that the heart rate was 170, 180 beats per minute, which is
on average.
On average. So aerobic fitness is obviously hugely important. And then coming from aerobic fitness, obviously a lot of strength training helps support a high aerobic fitness. So that would make sense in the way they're doing a lot of split squats and the I thought that was a weighted rower, but he's just actually finding it hard to row the concept to rower. But one thing they were saying interesting there as well is, you know, the forces when you're braking. I assume there is high forces when you are pressing. I don't know why pressing the brake would be any different in an F1 car.
Because even though they're strapped into the car, your foot is also the first point of contact. So when you're resisting that, and you have all of your momentum coming forward, if you're going 190 miles an hour, then your foot is actually going through a lot of force, no matter how sensitive the pedal is.
The I like the hand-eye coordination drills. That's obviously
we used to do this for a warm-up in the gym the whole time.
Yeah, it's a big one in CrossFit with the sticks.
Yeah.
Comparison to the rest of his body, his neck is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just seeing a random montage of aerobic stuff. Him doing kissy wink. Did he make you give you fanny flutter when he winked?
Yeah.
Blood doping there.
Severe blood doping, yeah.
So probably the main thing as well that they'll always have to focus on is being very low weight. So obviously the lower you are, the lower in weight, obviously the better it is for the car. They do weigh them after races as well. So it's obviously being taken into account. Obviously they're down to like grams or kilograms in terms of how much a car weighs and how much can you weigh off it. So obviously you don't need someone who's 100 plus kilos, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting that they have some boxing stuff in here. Like, this is the kind of general cardio, 80 to 90% that I'd say most of their training is made up of. Like planks and skipping.
They all seem to really like boxing cardio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they look, well,
Big tough guy.
I don't know if
Yeah.
they really like doing boxing cardio, or
Yeah.
do they really like doing boxing cardio when the cameras are there?
Maybe.
Do you get what I mean?
Boxing cardio does feel effective, though. It does feel like you're doing
Oh,
stuff.
it really does, yeah. But most importantly, when the cameras are there,
Mhm.
looks like you're a big tough guy.
You're a big tough guy. So like, so we just got some general strength training again, more boxing training, whole rows, pressing, whole rows.
Yeah.
So obviously the races actually do take a long time as well. So you're under a severe amount of stress. So you obviously have a lot of cortisol. Blood pressure will be very, very high. Beats per minute will be very high. So having a very, very high quality aerobic fitness will allow you to remain calm under pressure. So one of the things interesting I was talking about recently, and I don't think I mentioned on any video or podcast, but there was listening to a podcast with a gentleman who is kind of focusing on nose breathing compared to mouth breathing, and how you activate different kind of, parts of your nervous system or system, or kind of, flight or flight patterns. So he was saying when you are mouth breathing, it should be minimal amount of time, because when you're mouth breathing, you are narrowing your field of focus and you are in a stressful environment because you're trying to focus in on one thing. However, that makes you worse at decision making. So nasal breathing is how you should be breathing 99% of the time. Even under, for the most of their sports, you would have a wider peripheral vision and you make better decisions. So obviously, milliseconds of difference for them would make a huge difference on something like nasal breathing. But obviously, your ability to nasal breathe hugely depends on your efficiency as an aerobic athlete. So the better their aerobic fitness would be, the better it would be for them to make decisions. So obviously, that's a huge player again. So it's coming back to that.
Right. Getting into the what everyone wants to see here. This is the weighted pressing. So what we see here is some sort of contraption, and what this will be considered by, or if I'm correctly calling this is a constant concentric loading machine. So you'll see these in gyms where no matter what direction you're moving, it's always concentric. This was thought in the late 80s, early 90s to be the next generation in training for athletes. So with the concentric phase, like shortening a muscle under tension, is basically way less fatiguing. They thought it would get better strength outcomes, but in reality it doesn't. And it doesn't induce hypertrophy or muscle tearing in the same way that eccentric loading or the amortization phase would. So when you get just these kind of really strong pressing in, what they're trying to do is they're trying to learn a movement. So learn how to fire those muscles in the correct sequence at the correct speed and have better reaction times. But if they were to actually get stronger at these movements, so you'll see them pushing against it and pressing their backs back against it, they're not really going to get the best strength outcomes because there's no eccentric phase to it at all.
One thing as well, if you watch the weighted wheel, the resistance of, so he's sitting in a mock-up F1 car and he's going, left and right. And so this is the thing we talked about in any of the combat sport athletes we've done, where we talked about how you want your sport-specific actions to remain specific, so you keep them to the exact same environment that you would do them. So don't alter them in any strange way. So if you're doing javelin throwing, you wouldn't use a much heavier javelin. Someone's going to be like, no, he did use that. But, we talked about weighted punches, where you shouldn't do weighted punches. You don't want to alter that sport-specific skill. And same with this. It's something as kind of, especially as dangerous as F1 or life and death. You don't want to be overcorrecting a steer or understeering. You don't want to ingrain these patterns. The active steering, when they are steering the car, it's obviously set up incredibly well. They have power steering in their Formula 1 cars, I hope. So their ability, the force they need to apply to the steering wheel isn't high. Rather, it's precision and timing of when it is. So encouraging them to do something different, and a weighted steering wheel would only have negative outcomes in I suppose my opinion, when it comes to their actual sports doing it in the F1. It doesn't make sense to do something like that.
One area where something like that constant concentric loading would make sense would be in a return from injury context. So say if you had a driver that had a crash and they had some sort of upper limb injury, you could possibly get them back in that machine. Or particularly if they had a lower limb injury and they weren't able to use their legs for the next number of weeks, you could get them in that machine and maintain condition in the muscle. But is it really necessary? Well, probably not. So thanks very much for watching another reaction video. If you're a Formula 1 driver and you want some S&C consultancy, you can give us an email at seekastrength@gmail.com. Or if you're not a Formula 1 driver, you want training programs, consultancy, all of that good stuff, just click the link down below and it'll bring you to seekastrength.com.